I recently faced my own worst nightmare. The HOA president blocked our only access lane with boulders, then screamed at me when I confronted her about it. And her excuse? She said that they were calming art pieces, not obstacles. Funny thing is, she just blocked the only fire truck trying to save her home from burning to the ground. Let me start from the beginning. They call it Harmony Creek Estates. Sounds peaceful, right? Like birds chirping and lemonade on the porch. Well, some days the birds do chirp, but mostly what you hear around here are the rustling sounds of new HOA violation notices being printed. I'm Jack, by the way. And if my tone sounds a little, let's say crisp, it's because living in Harmony Creek can do that to a guy. Especially when your homeowners association is run by a woman who probably thinks community is a word you use to make people do what you want. Her name is Karen. Yes, that Karen. Or at least, she's the final boss level of Karens. Our little slice of suburban paradise is, to put it mildly, snug. The houses are packed in like sardines in a designer tin, all with perfectly manicured lawns that have to be exactly 2.5 inches high, or else. Karen carries a ruler. I've seen it. She patrols the streets in her golf cart, which she's named the Enforcer, with a glint in her eye that could curdle milk. She's the self-appointed queen of our little kingdom, and her edicts are law. Last week, it was the official Harmony Creek Mailbox Standardization Initiative. Turns out my mailbox, which has faithfully received bills and junk mail for a decade, was suddenly an affront to visual harmony. It was beige. The new approved color?
Grage.
That's gray-beige. The difference is apparently monumental and worth a $75 fine if you don't comply by Friday. My best friend Dave lives 3 doors down. He got a notice for his garden hose. Apparently, it was coiled in a counterclockwise direction, which, according to a newly minted addendum to Bylaw 74C, subsection parrot, was visually disruptive. I'm not kidding. Dave figures she just waits for him to wash his car, then invents a new rule.
He's probably right.
He says living here is like being pecked to death by a very well-groomed goose. I told him he was being too kind to the goose. Then there's Uncle Vince. He's not really my uncle. He's this wonderfully strange old guy who lives on the corner. He wears Hawaiian shirts year-round and has a flock of plastic flamingos that he rearranges daily on his lawn, much to Karen's visible distress. He calls it performance art. Karen calls it a blight. Uncle Vince got a notice last month because one of his flamingos, specifically Bartholomew, was leaning at an unapproved angle. Uncle Vince's response? He put a tiny feathered witch hat on Bartholomew and a little sign saying, "Curses on petty tyrants." Karen was not amused. She sent him a fine for the hat, the sign, and the original lien. But her latest obsession has been beautification, which, in Karen speak, means making life more difficult for everyone else under the guise of making things prettier. First, it was the mandatory flower boxes that had to contain only petunias. Red petunias. Not pink, not purple, red. Then it was the Pathway Illumination Project, which involved I recently faced my own worst nightmare. They mostly just highlighted how many snails were out for an evening stroll. Boulders. You trip over the snails before the lights warned you about the curb. And her excuse? Each new project said that they were was accompanied by a self-congratulatory newsletter filled with exclamation points and photos of Karen smiling fire truck trying to save her home from burning to something expensive the HOA fees had just paid for. They call it Harmony Creek firefighter. Sounds been peaceful, for 15 years. Like birds chirping and lemonade on the porch. Mostly, it's a lot of training. Some days the birds a lot of early mornings or late nights. What you hear around here are the rustling sounds that clings to your HOA violation notices being printed. But I do it, I'm Jack, because someone has to. And because when that alarm goes off, let's say people are scared, it's because living in Harmony Creek, our station is just outside Harmony Creek. Especially when your homeowners association is run by a woman who probably thinks part of the neighborhood is a word you use to make people do what you want. Houses cozier. Her name is Karen. A particular road called Whispering Pines Lane. Or at least it's not much for Whispering Pines. She's the final boss level of mostly Karens. Just tightly packed houses. Our little slice of suburban paradise way, and for our big engine, to put it mildly, engine 12. The houses are all the ladders, like sardines and a designer tin. Power. All with perfectly manicured lawns that have to be sends out another one of her glossy newsletters. Or else. This one was printed on cardstock that felt thicker than my wallet. She
It
patrols
announced
the streets
with
in her
much
golf
fanfare,
cart, which
a
she's
major
named the
community
Enforcer,
improvement project
with a
that was
glint in
soon
her
to
eye that could enhance
curdle
the
milk.
natural elegance
She's
of
the
whispering
self-appointed
Pines
queen
Lane
of our little kingdom.
There were no
and
details,
her edicts
just
are
that
law.
title.
Last
A picture
week,
of
it
a
was the
serene,
official
empty
Harmony
road.
Creek mailbox
Definitely not
standardization
whispering Pines
initiative.
Lane. Turns
And
out
a
my
date
mailbox,
for the grand
which has
unveiling.
faithfully
A
received
shiver
bills
of
and
unease
junk mail
went down
for a
my
decade,
spine.
was
And it
suddenly
wasn't
an
from the
affront
autumn
to
chill.
visual harmony. When Karen
It
gets
was
mysterious,
beige.
it
The new
usually
approved
means
color?
something monumentally
Beige.
inconvenient
That's gray
is about to
beige.
happen.
The
Dave
difference
said
is apparently
he was
monumental
stocking up on aspirin,
and worth a
Uncle Vince said
$75 fine
he was teaching
if you
his
don't comply
flamingos
by
to form a
Friday.
defensive
My
perimeter.
best friend Dave
I just had a
lives
bad
3
feeling.
doors down.
A really
He got a
bad
notice
feeling that
for
this
his garden
natural
hose.
elegance was going to
Apparently,
be anything
it
but
was
natural
coiled in a
and certainly not an
counterclockwise
improvement.
direction.
Which,
What fresh
according
new
to a
headache
newly
was our
minted HOA
addendum
to
Queen about
bylaw
to bestow
74
upon us
C,
this time?
subsection parrot, was visually disruptive. I'm not kidding. Dave figures she just waits for him to wash his car, then invents a new rule.
He's probably right.
He says living here is like being pecked to death by a very well-groomed goose. I told him he was being too kind to the goose. Then there's Uncle Vince. He's not really my uncle. He's this wonderfully strange old guy who lives on the corner. He wears Hawaiian shirts year-round and has a flock of plastic flamingos that he rearranges daily on his lawn, much to Karen's visible distress. He calls it performance art. Karen calls it a blight. Uncle Vince got a notice last month because one of his flamingos, specifically Bartholomew, was leaning at an unapproved angle. Uncle Vince's response? He put a tiny feathered witch hat on Bartholomew and a little sign saying, "Curses on petty tyrants." Karen was not amused. She sent him a fine for the hat, the sign, and the original lien. But her latest obsession has been beautification, which, in Karen speak, means making life more difficult for everyone else under the guise of making things prettier. First, it was the mandatory flower boxes that had to contain only petunias. Red petunias. Not pink, not purple, red. Then it was the Pathway Illumination Project, which involved I recently faced my own worst nightmare. Friday arrived gray and HOA president blocked my only access lane true to Karen's you tripped over the snails when I confronted her did the materials and her excuse. Each new said that they were was accompanied by a self-congratulatory newsletter filled with funny down whispering photos of Karen smiling stopped right at that tricky curve usually next to something one spot we let me start from the beginning. Paid for. They call it Harmony with a groan of hydraulics have been for 15 vibrated like birds chirping and lemonade on the porch. It's a lot of tree some days the birds do early morning, but little garden what you hear around here are the smell of smoke, SUVs flows like gray, lumpy, and but I do it. I'm jacked undeniably in the way. And if my tunnel sounds outside of the narrow road, let's say people are scared, it's because living in Harmony tight. Our station is just outside, especially when your homeowners association primary by a woman. I just think part of the community. This wasn't just a word used to make people do what was dangerous. Her name is Karen. Particular road, yes, even for Pines Lane. Or it's not much for neighborhood boss level. Mostly just people were wandering down to whispering suburban paradise way and pointing, to put it mildly. And Karen, of course, the one with already there, cleaning like designer to just single-handedly perfectly manicured lawns that Karen sends out another hard hat glossy one, or else this one was printed on Karen's board that felt bigger than my poor souls. It announced the streets on much fanfare, attempting to make a major community improvement project with a glint in her eye that could enhance the natural elegance. She's the self-appointed queen of our little kingdom. There were no strategically placed just that disguise the last picture of it was the official Harmony Creek mailbox. Definitely not whispering. Dave called me. Turns out my mail for the grand unveiling faithfully received finally lost junk mail for a decade. Utterly it wasn't from the autumn chill. Visual harmony. When Karen gets mysterious, my voice usually means something monumentally just about ugly beige to happen. The difference is apparently stocking up on aspirin. Tell me something I don't know. $75 fine. He was teaching a bunch of us are going to form a defensive. My best friend Dave lives. I just had when we got doors down about a dozen bad notice already got natural elegance was going to be anything but spoiled in a counter-direction. Full lecture mode. What fresh new headache was our HOA to bylaw 74 C is our new traffic calming and visually charm enhancement feature. I'm not kidding. It will encourage slower speeds. She just waits for him to wash his car, then add a touch of rugged elegance to our lovely community. He says living here is like being pecked to death, bless his heart, by a very well-groomed goose. But Karen, I told him he was being too kind to the goose. Or an ambulance. Then there's Uncle Vince. Karen waved not really my uncle. Nonsense,
He's this wonderfully
Harold.
strange
They'll
old
manage.
guy who lives on the
It
corner.
just requires a
He
little
wears
more
Hawaiian
finesse.
shirts year-round
Besides,
and has a
the
flock of
aesthetic
plastic
benefits
flamingos
far
that he
outweigh
rearranges
any
daily
minor
on his lawn.
inconveniences.
Much to Karen's
That's
visible
when I
distress.
stepped forward.
He calls
Karen,
it performance art,
I said,
trying
trying
to
to
keep
keep
my
my
voice
voice
even.
blight.
I'm
Uncle
not sure
Vince
you
got a
thought
notice
this
last
through.
month because
As a
one of his
firefighter,
flamingos,
I can tell you right now,
Bartholomew,
Engine 12
was leaning
will not
at
fit
an
through that
unapproved
gap.
angle.
Not without taking
Uncle
out your
Vince's
rustic
response,
charm and
he
half
put
the
a
truck
tiny
with it.
feathered which had
Her
on
eyes
Bartholomew
narrowed,
and a little
she
sign
knew who I
saying,
was, knew about my
"Curses on
volunteer
petty
work."
tyrants.
She'd even
Karen
tried
was
to
not
find a fire
amused.
station once.
She
for
sent him a fine for the
excessive
hack,
siren
the
noise
sign,
during daylight
and the
hours.
original lien.
That
But
hadn't
her
gone well
latest
for her.
obsession has been
Well,
beautification,
Jack,
which,
she
in
said,
Karen speak,
her voice
means
dripping
making
with
life more
artificial
difficult
sweetness.
for everyone else
Perhaps
under
your
the
little
guise
red
of
truck,
making things
as you
prettier.
call it,
First,
needs
it
to
was the
learn some
mandatory
new
flower
maneuvers.
boxes
This
that had
is
to contain
approved by
only
the HOA.
petunias.
By me.
Red petunias.
It's in the best
Not
interest
pink,
of Harmony
not
Creek.
purple.
The
Red.
best interest
Then
of Harmony
it was the
Creek
pathway
is having a fire
illumination
department
project,
that
which
can reach a
involved
burning house. I countered, my patience wearing thin. This is a safety hazard, plain and simple. A few other neighbors murmured agreement. Karen's smile tightened. I have a permit from the HOA Architectural Review Committee, she declared, tapping her clipboard, which, of course, she chaired. It was like arguing with a poorly programmed robot. Just then, Uncle Vince arrived, pushing a wheelbarrow. In the wheelbarrow were two of his smallest plastic flamingos, both wearing tiny construction helmets. He trundled right up to one of the boulders. "Excuse me, Madam President," he said with a little bow to Karen. "I believe these are load-bearing flamingos. They're here to ensure structural integrity and proper feng shui for your delightful rock garden." He then proceeded to carefully place the flamingos on top of the boulder, adjusting their helmets. Karen's face went a fascinating shade of purple. "That is vandalism of community property and improper flamingo attire," she sputtered. "Not at all," Uncle Vince said cheerfully. "They're safety inspectors. See?
Bartholomew is checking for stress fractures." He patted the flamingo. While Karen was momentarily distracted by the great flamingo inspection, Dave leaned over to me. "She's not going to budge, is she?" "Not a chance," I said. "She's dug in deeper than these rocks." Underscore 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 underscore. The battle lines are drawn. The next day, official-looking violation notices appeared on the doors of everyone who had dared to question Karen at the unveiling. Mine was for public disputation of an approved HOA beautification project. Dave's was for inciting skepticism. I kid you not. I went to the station and filed a formal complaint with the fire marshal's office, detailing the obstruction. I attached photos. I CC'd the town council. I knew it would take time, but it had to be done. But Karen, she was just getting started. 2 days later, a new newsletter arrived. This one featured a glowing article, written by Karen, of course, about the resounding success of the Whispering Pines boulders. It included testimonials from anonymous, delighted residents. I'd bet my pension she wrote those herself. And it ended with a stark warning. Any attempts to tamper with, deface, or otherwise disrespect these new community landmarks will be met with the full and unyielding force of HOA sanctions, including substantial fines and potential legal action. The battle lines were drawn, and those stupid, massive rocks sat there, blocking the way, a monument to her ego and a disaster waiting to happen. The question was, what kind of disaster? And when? Underscore 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 underscore. The breaking point. It was just after 2 a.m., the kind of quiet that feels heavy like a blanket. I was at the station, doing my regular overnight shift. Most of the crew were asleep in the bunk room, or trying to be. I was at the watch desk, rereading the latest memo from downtown about proper hose folding techniques. Riveting stuff. The only sounds were the hum of the ancient refrigerator in the kitchenette and the occasional snore from the bunk room that sounded like a hibernating bear with a sinus infection. Then the tones dropped. That sudden, piercing shriek that cuts through sleep, through silence, through everything. Adrenaline, instant and hot, flooded my system. Years of this, and it still gets you every single time. Asterisk Station 12, Station 4, Engine 7, Ladder 3, Rescue 1. Respond to a reported structure fire. 3 alarm activation. Address is 112, Whispering Pines Lane, Harmony Creek Estates. Repeat, 112, Whispering Pines Lane. Timeout 214. Asterisk. My heart hammered against my ribs. Whispering Pines Lane, Harmony Creek. Not just any address in Harmony Creek, but one deep in the back, right where those blasted boulders were. This is it, I muttered, already moving, shrugging into my turnout gear. The station exploded into controlled chaos, boots thudding, gear bags grabbed, the roar of Engine 12's diesel engine coughing to life, shaking the whole building. I was in my seat, buckling up, as we pulled out of the bay, siren wailing, lights painting the dark streets in strobes of red and white. Dave flashed through my mind. This was the exact scenario we'd dreaded. We were the first engine due on scene. Our captain, Mike, a veteran with nerves of steel and a face like a road map of every fire he'd ever fought, was at the wheel. Whispering Pines, he grunted, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. That's the one with the decorations, right, Jack? Yeah, Cap, I said, my voice tight. Big ones. Right in the damn way. He just nodded grimly.
We all knew what that meant.
We made good time through the sleeping town, he said with a little bow to Karen. As we turned onto the main drag leading into Harmony Creek, load-bearing flamingos. My stomach clenched. They're here to ensure structural integrity and proper feng shui for your delightful rock garden. As we rounded the bend into the lane, he then proceeded to carefully place the flamingos on top of the boulder, of serenity, adjusting their helmets. Monumental folly. Karen's face gleaming faintly in our shade of purple, looking even bigger vandalism and more obstructive in the dead of night. And improper flamingo attire, she sputtered. Not for Engine 12. Uncle
No
Vince
room,
said
Cap,
cheerfully. Yelled Marco
There's
from the
safety
officer's
inspectors,
seat, stating the
See?
obvious. Bartholomew
Mike
is
didn't
checking
hesitate.
for stress fractures.
He keyed
his radio mic. He patted the flamingo.
Engine 12 to command.
While Karen was
We have
momentarily
roadway
distracted
obstruction
by
at
the
Whispering
great flamingo
Pines.
inspection.
Decorative
Dave
boulders.
leaned over to me.
Unable to proceed
She's not going to
without
budge,
contact.
is she? Requesting
Not a
permission
chance,
to mitigate
I said.
obstruction. She's dug in deeper.
That was Mike's
than
polite
these
way of
rocks.
saying,
"Are we random
underscore,
these things
underscore,
or what?"
underscore,
The reply
underscore,
from the
underscore,
incident
underscore,
commander
underscore,
was still on
underscore,
route.
underscore,
Was
underscore,
terse.
underscore, underscore,
Command to
underscore,
Engine 12.
underscore,
If
underscore,
that's your
underscore,
only access
underscore,
to a confirmed
underscore,
structure
underscore,
fire,
underscore,
you are
underscore,
clear to
underscore,
mitigate.
underscore,
Advise
underscore,
when
underscore,
clear.
underscore,
Hang
underscore,
on,
underscore,
Mike
underscore,
yelled over his
underscore,
shoulder.
underscore,
He
underscore,
downshifted.
underscore,
The
underscore,
big
underscore,
engine groaned,
underscore,
then
underscore,
surged
underscore,
forward.
underscore,
I
underscore.
braced myself.
The battle lines
There was
are
a
drawn.
hideous screech
The
of
next
metal
day,
on stone.
official-looking
jarring
violation
notices
notices
appeared
all
on the
against
doors
our
of everyone
seatbelts,
who had
and
dared
then
to
a
question
series of
Karen
shuddering
at the
impacts
unveiling.
as Engine 12.
Mine was for
All
public
20 tons
disputation
of
of an approved
forced her way
HOA
through.
beautification project.
Sparks flew.
Dave's
like
was
an evil
for
fireworks
inciting
display.
skepticism.
The sound was
I
like
kid you
a
not.
giant tearing
I
up
went to the
a
station
sheet metal
and
factory.
filed a formal complaint
One boulder
with the
was
fire
shoved
marshal's
sideways,
office,
gouging
detailing
a
the
deep
obstruction.
scar in the asphalt.
I attached photos.
The other one, well,
I
the other
CC'd
one
the town
seemed to
council.
sort of crumble.
I knew it
at
would take
one end.
time.
So
it
much
had to be
for
done.
rustic charm.
But Karen,
we were through.
Oh, she was
battered.
just getting started.
Definitely going to need
2
some
days
paint,
later,
and
probably
a new
newsletter
newsletter
arrived. But
This
through.
one featured
And just
a
as we
glowing
cleared the
article
wreckage of her
written by
beautification
Karen,
project,
of course,
about
a
the
figure
resounding
emerged from the
success
house right
of the
next to the
Whispering
boulders.
Pines boulders.
Number
It
114
included testimonials from
Pines.
anonymous,
It was
delighted
Karen,
residents.
dressed
I
in
bet
a
my
bright
pension
pink
she
silk
wrote
robe,
those herself.
hair in giant
And it
curlers,
ended with a stark
her
warning.
face a mask
Any
of
attempts
outrage.
to tamper with,
She was
deface,
holding her phone up,
or otherwise
clearly
disrespect
recording
these new
and
community
screeching like a
landmarks will be
banshee.
met with a full
Vandals,
and unyielding
hooligans
force of HOA
you are
sanctions,
destroying community
including
property.
substantial
I
fines
have you
and
on
potential
camera.
legal action.
You will pay for
The
this.
battle lines were drawn.
This is an outrage.
And those stupid,
my
beautiful
massive rocks
sentinels
sat there.
I'll have your
blocking the way.
jobs.
A monument to her ego
fire
and a
department.
disaster waiting
Community
to happen.
standards.
The question was,
bylaws.
what kind of disaster?
Her voice was a
and
shrill
when?
torrent
Underscore,
of indignation. Even over the thrum of our engine and the approaching sirens of other units. She was so incensed about her rocks. She hadn't even looked further down the street. Then dispatch crackled over the radio again. The voice calm but urgent. Asterisk command dispatch. Update on the address for the structure fire at 112 Whispering Pines. We have a frantic call back from the homeowner at that address. It was just after 2 a.m.
Sir,
the kind of quiet that
can you
feels
confirm
heavy
the fire
like a blanket.
is at 112?
I was at the station doing my regular overnight shift. Most of the crew were asleep in the bunk room.
Then,
or
affirmative
trying to be.
Command.
I was at the watch
fire
desk,
is at the
rereading the
complainant's
latest
residence.
memo from downtown.
The original
about
complainant
proper
who
hose
reported the
folding
fire
techniques.
is the
Riveting
resident
stuff.
of 112.
The only sounds
Whispering
were the hum
Pines
of the
Lane.
ancient refrigerator
My blood
in the
ran
kitchenette,
cold,
and the occasional
112,
snore from the bunk
Whispering
room
Pines
that sounded
Lane.
like a
I knew that
hibernating bear
address with a
I
sinus
knew
infection.
whose house that was.
Then the
Marco
tones dropped.
next to me
That
was looking
sudden,
at his map display.
piercing shriek that
he
cuts
turned
through sleep,
eyes wide,
through silence,
cap, jack,
through everything.
112
Adrenaline,
Whispering
instant
Pines.
and hot.
That's
Flooded my system.
right on cue.
Years of this,
as if the
and
universe
it still
had a
gets you
wicked sense
every
of
single
comedic
time.
timing.
A bright
Station
orange
12,
glow became
Station
visible
4,
just
Engine
beyond
7,
Karen's own
Ladder
meticulously
3,
landscaped
Rescue
hedge.
1.
Flames
Respond
were
to
starting
a
to lick up
reported
the
structure
side
fire.
of her perfect
3-alarm
two-story gray
activation.
colonial.
Address
Karen
is 112.
Still mid-rant
Whispering
about her
Pines
precious
Lane,
boulders.
Harmony Creek
suddenly
Estates.
stopped.
Her
Repeat.
jaw,
Which had been
112,
flapping
Whispering
furiously,
Pines Lane,
hung slack.
Timeout 214.
Her eyes followed
Asterisk.
our gaze down the street.
My heart
The
hammered
smug
against
fury
my ribs.
on her face melted.
Whispering Pines
replaced
Lane,
by a dawning,
Harmony Creek.
horrified comprehension.
Not just any address
her
in
phone
Harmony
slipped
Creek,
from her fingers
but one
and
deep in the
clattered
back,
onto her perfectly
right where those
paved
blasted
driveway.
boulders were.
The
This
only
is it.
sound from her was
I
a
muttered,
small, already
choked
moving,
gasp.
shrugging
The
into my
beautiful,
turnout gear.
serene, the station
Infuriatingly
exploded into
obstructive
controlled
Whispering
chaos.
Pines Lane
Boots
was about to
thudding,
become the
gear
hottest
bags
spot
grabbed,
in Harmony Creek.
the roar of
and
Engine
its
12's
self-appointed
diesel
queen
engine
was
coughing
right
to
in
life,
the middle of the
shaking
inferno.
the whole building.
She, in a way,
I was in my
helped make it
seat,
harder to fight.
buckling up.
What would she
As
do
we
now?
pulled out of the bay,
More
siren
importantly,
wailing.
What were we
Lights
about to
painting
face?
the dark streets in strobes of red and white.
Dave flashed through my mind. This was the exact scenario we'd dreaded. We were the first engine due on scene. Our captain, Mike, a veteran with nerves of steel and a face like a road map of every fire he'd ever fought, was at the wheel. Whispering Pines, he grunted, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. That's the one with the decorations, right, Jack? Yeah, Cap, I said, my voice tight. Big ones. Right in the damn way. He just nodded grimly.
We all knew what that meant.